Hey guys, I was away when Jurassic World first came out, so I didn't get to do the review for Jurassic World. Ben did that, and for the most part I think I kind of agree with what you said, mainly dickhead. But regardless, I liked it a lot. One of my favourite things of all was Michael Giacchino's score. Michael Giacchino is one of those composers who, I don't know, I really like everything he does, and sometimes I end up being more excited for Michael Giacchino's score for a film than I do for the film itself. Like back in February's Jupiter Ascending, and I was more excited to hear Michael Giacchino's music for Jupiter Ascending than I was to see Jupiter Ascending. And that wasn't quite the case with Jurassic World, but it was one of the things that I was most excited about. And that's also because Jurassic Park has a legacy of having fantastic music. Because I know people will always say, like, to think about the Jurassic Park theme and how, I mean, it has two. It has the fanfare to the island. And then it has the main theme. And that's pretty good for a film to have two iconic score themes in there. But also, The Lost World has some really great music. John Williams actually thinks that his score for The Lost World is better than his score for Jurassic Park. It's very different because it's got this sort of more jungly and more primal, but also darker sound. It's much less inflected with a kind of sense of awe. But anyway, I really like those two film score, and the third one kind of is decent. But anyway, my point is, I was very, very, very excited for what Michael Giacchino was going to do with this film. And I gotta say, I was not disappointed. I think the main thing with Jurassic World score is that it does feel quite a lot like a Michael Giacchino score. And so there are a lot of times where you can sort of hear a bit of like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, or a bit of Star Trek, or a bit of Super 8, I know it's quite a lot in there. So there is a lot of Michael Giacchino-isms in there. But to me that's no bad thing. At worst, it occasionally sounds a little bit like a best of Giacchino playlist, and at best it sounds like that too, which is good. So what does he do well? Well, firstly it opens with this track called Bury the Hatchling, which, if you've seen the film, is for the very, very opening when you're looking at the close-ups of the egg. And it works really well because it has that kind of, the kind of 2001 Godzilla, and I suppose they're using Dawn of the Planet of the Apes as well, choir thing. And they use that in the first Jurassic Park as well, when the raptors open the door for the first time. And I think what it's sort of supposed to be symbolising is the threat of a creature of this kind of power, but also intelligence. And I think when you think that they used it to signify the raptors at the end of the first film, then to open this film with that is a really good way of saying that, like, this new thing is even more threatening than the raptors. Because of birth, we're using that kind of music for it. And generally I think one of the things it does really well is it does a really good job at scoring the carnivores. Because each carnivore, the raptors and the Adonis and the T-Rex, have their own theme in this. And I think they reflect the actual personalities of those dinosaurs, because I don't think it just treats them as monsters, it treats them as characters, which is something that I really, really liked. So when you have the Raptors theme, it sounds a bit like Cobras from Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and it basically is all about their kind of intelligence and how they are. It reflects both their animalistic nature and their intellect. And then the T-Rex probably gets actually the best original track in the whole thing, with this one called Our Rex is Bigger Than Yours, which is for the climax of the film. And it starts with this thing that I just love. All the Jurassic Park films do this, with the heroic T-Rex music. They do that in like all of them. For some reason, they make out like the T-Rex is this hero when it's a killing machine, and it's only a hero because it's maybe the lesser of two evils here, but it's a really good piece of music. Firstly, because that bit is so triumphant, and then it kicks into some pretty good action music because fight scenes are quite hard to score in a non-generic way, but Giacchino does a good way of doing it with this kind of tribal music. Then it goes into something that I just adored, which is there's a small little brief quote of the Lost World theme in there. And that I was really not expecting, because this film does a lot of using the Jurassic Park theme. But I didn't expect the Lost World to be in there, because I just think because the film The Lost World is less known, then the score is less known to people, and so quoting it doesn't have as much impact as it does with Jurassic Park. So I thought they might just not do it because they might think people don't know it as well. But I was so happy to see Michael Giacchino do that. And yeah, while we're on that subject, let's get to the actual using of Jurassic Park, because they use, not only do they use the aforementioned the fanfare island, welcome to the island thing, but they also do the main theme, which gets basically an entire track to itself, that one, in Welcome to Jurassic World, which is basically just the main theme in this 2-minute kind of new version. And I wanted to talk about this because I think some people could maybe be a bit critical of that, because it feels a bit like, oh, the best track from the soundtrack is one that already existed and was composed by John Williams over 20 years ago. And I understand why someone would say that. But here's what I have to say on the subject, because I think that avoiding it would have been more noticeable than using it. Every Jurassic Park film so far has used that, because it's like doing Star Wars without the Star Wars theme. It just doesn't really make sense. If you tried to avoid it, everyone would just miss it. And I've been in the cinema when they used this, and people were like around me were like, ah, it's that music. But that was me mainly. It was me. But I think if Giacchino tried to do something entirely new without it, I just don't think that could have worked. But what Michael Giacchino does do is he subtly tweaks it a little in a way that I think maybe makes the best ultimate recording of it. I mean, obviously, the praise still goes to John Williams for doing the thing in the first place. But what Michael Giacchino does is he does it in this kind of way that kind of, I don't know, it feels to me like it's playing on the recognizability and the anticipation that music has. It kind of feels like it starts in this way that's kind of like teasing it in, because it knows people like me would freak the hell out when it starts playing. And then it goes into the actual main theme itself, and he just adds a couple of things. Like, I think he's added some strings to it, just really faintly in the background towards the end. And just things like that just really make it, I think, the most triumphant and the most kind of full-on version of that particular track that there is. So, it does rest on the original theme, but I think that was inevitable. And I think it worked really, 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 really well. Having said that, it's not like Giacchino doesn't do anything new. As I said, he already did some of that stuff for the carnivals that's good, but he does do what I would call the theme for this film in particular, which can probably most clearly be heard in a track called As the Jurassic World Turns. Sounds quite a lot like what he did for Tomorrowland. That's not a criticism, because it's a very, very good piece of score for a place, which is not something I often think about, actually. Usually when you think of themes, you think of themes for the film or for characters. But this is a really good theme for the park and for the place, and it kind of reflects the initial kind of wonder that you have for it with this one. don't know what you call it, but it has, I think they sound a bit like tambourines, but this kind of very faintly hear them in the background, but again, it sounds a lot like The Lost World, and I really, really like that. But for me, one of the things that I like most about Michael Giacchino is how he does emotional music in blockbusters, because I think most composers are focused on coming up with their amazing, ridiculously grand themes, whereas Michael Giacchino feels like he's not that interested in doing that, and he's much more interested in emotional journeys, and in kind of really seamlessly blending the different kind of tones of something throughout a really consistent piece of music that is the entire album. So it feels like there's less memorable music maybe, but it's just one steady, great piece of music overall. One of these emotional cues that I really liked is called, and you have to forgive me for saying this if I'm saying it wrong, but Pavane for a dead Apatosaurus? It's basically played, if you've seen the film, when all of those Apatosauruses are dead on the field and Chris Pratt holds that animatronic one's head as it dies. And it's very typical Giacchino kind of soft piano music. And listening to it on its own right, it's pretty emotionally affecting. And I was all the way through the film, I was waiting for something like it. And when it kicked in, I kind of went, oh, good, because I was concerned that maybe he got carried away doing the louder stuff because dinosaurs. But to just have a little moment like that, I think it's really needed in the score. And it's maybe, if anything, a little too brief, and there could have been a bit more like it. And finally, there are these two tracks that I was really surprised by. I wasn't surprised by them because I'd seen the film, but I was really surprised they were included in there. And I really, really like them. And these two are called It's a Small Jurassic World and The Hammond Lab Overture. And both of these are kind of meant to be the music that you hear in the park. You know, like how in Disneyland you have the Disneyland music around you. So it's diegetic music. It exists within the film. It's the park's music in the film. And it's really good, it's really fun, and it's just that kind of, the whole film felt like it spent a lot of detail making the park feel like a real place. It was nice to see that Giacchino was a part of that. And apparently he did the music for a lot of like Disney's rides, like like Space Mountain and things. So it actually feels quite a lot like those. It's like, yeah, I can believe that this is the music for a theme park. So I really liked those little additions at the end as well. So overall, I really, really like the Jurassic World score. I think it is telling that its most memorable piece already existed before, but I think it's also inevitable. Yeah, I'm not wearing my Engine shirt, which I feel like I should because I've wear that Engine shirt on so many of these, but it's in the wash. I don't know why I told you that.